Hook down to 15s. Somewhere right now, two people are sitting in the same open plan office doing the same job with the same title, and one of them is making $30,000 more than the other. And the company? Can't explain why. Tension, 15 to 60s. Pay transparency laws were supposed to fix this. When states started requiring companies to post salary ranges on job listings, there was this collective exhale. Finally, sunlight, accountability, the truth. But something unexpected happened. Workers started seeing the numbers, and then they started asking questions. And then HR departments across the country ran into a wall they didn't expect. They couldn't answer. Not because the information was hidden, but because there was no logic to defend, no system, no framework that held up under scrutiny. According to a recent Fortune investigation, most companies genuinely cannot explain why they pay what they pay. Not a cover story, not a deflection. Actual organizational confusion at the highest levels. And if your employer doesn't know why you make what you make, what does that say about what you're actually worth to them? Body. Let's start at the beginning, because the salary system we all live inside wasn't designed with fairness in mind. It wasn't really designed at all. It evolved. In the post-war economy, salaries were negotiated behind closed doors, kept secret by social norm and sometimes by policy. The idea was that transparency would cause chaos, jealousy, resentment, instability. So companies built pay structures in the dark. Manager discretion, negotiation outcomes, market surveys that were already outdated by the time they were published. A little bit of bias here, a little favoritism there, compounded over decades. What you end up with is a system that looks rational from the outside, with job levels and salary bands and performance review cycles, but is functionally arbitrary at its core. Here's the part that should unsettle you. Research on compensation psychology shows that most salary decisions are made in the first 60 seconds of a negotiation or hire, not based on a matrix, not based on internal equity analysis, based on how confident someone seemed, how much they asked for, whether they reminded the hiring manager of someone they trusted. This is called affinity bias in compensation, and it runs through almost every organization that hasn't actively, aggressively worked to dismantle it. So when pay transparency pulls back the curtain, what workers are seeing isn't a system that was fair but hidden. They're seeing proof that the system was never fair to begin with. Now here's where it gets psychologically complicated. Finding out your coworker makes more than you doesn't just make you angry. It does something specific to your brain. Researchers call it pay equity theory, first formalized by psychologist John Stacey Adams in the 1960s. The idea is simple. Humans are wired to compare inputs and outputs. What I give, what I get, versus what you give, what you get. When those ratios feel unequal, something breaks. Not just satisfaction, motivation, identity. The story you tell yourself about whether your work means anything. Studies from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that workers who discover they're paid below the median of their peers don't just become less happy. They become measurably less productive. They start mentally checking out. Some leave within 6 months. But here's what nobody tells you about that statistic. The company usually didn't lose a bad employee. They lost someone who was doing fine, maybe even good work, until the number made them feel invisible. So the pay gap doesn't just cost workers, it costs companies. And most of them still haven't connected those dots. Let's talk about the psychology of what it feels like to be on the wrong side of that gap. Because this isn't just about money, it never was. Salary is one of the primary ways modern institutions signal value. Not the only way. But in a culture where we spend most of our waking hours working, the number on your paycheck carries symbolic weight that goes way beyond what it can buy. It says, "This is how much we think you matter." And when that number feels arbitrary, when you can look at the evidence and see that it wasn't really earned or deserved or calculated, it doesn't just feel unfair. It feels like a verdict on your worth as a human being. That's not irrational. That's the system working exactly as it was built. Here's a pattern worth sitting with. Companies that resist pay transparency most aggressively tend to have the largest internal pay gaps. And the largest internal pay gaps tend to correlate with the loudest culture around loyalty, family atmosphere, and going above and beyond. Think about that for a second. The organizations that ask the most from you emotionally are often the ones most invested in you not knowing what you're actually worth on the open market. That's not a coincidence. That's a strategy. The NAMI-Ipsos Workplace Mental Health Poll from 2026 found that pay-related anxiety is now one of the top 3 drivers of workplace psychological distress. Not workload, not management. Pay. And specifically the feeling that compensation is opaque, arbitrary, and out of the employee's control. When we feel like we have no agency in a system that directly determines our security, our brain reads that as a threat. Chronic low-grade threat, the kind that doesn't trigger a single panic attack. It just quietly erodes everything. Sleep quality, relationship satisfaction, physical health. The sense that working hard has any actual connection to outcome. This is what arbitrary pay does to people over years, and most people are carrying it right now, today, without a name for it. Climax. Here's the central insight I want you to hold on to. The salary system was never primarily about rewarding performance. It was about managing behavior, keeping people in place, creating just enough hope that the next raise, the next review, the next promotion would finally make the math feel right. Pay transparency didn't create inequality. It revealed inequality that was already there, baked in, structural, decades old. And the companies scrambling to respond aren't scrambling because they want to fix it. They're scrambling because they've been caught without a story. The most honest thing a compensation expert said recently was this. Most organizations price labor the same way they'd price a used car. Whatever the market will bear, whatever the person in front of them will accept. Dressed up in the language of bands and levels to make it feel like science. It was never science. It was negotiation. And you were the only one who didn't know that was the game. Ending. So what do you do with that? You stop waiting for the system to tell you your worth. Because it can't. It doesn't know. It never did. Your salary is not a score. It is not a reflection of your intelligence, your effort, or your potential. It is the outcome of an imperfect, often irrational negotiation between what you asked for, what someone assumed about you, and what a company decided it could get away with. Knowing that doesn't fix the gap, but it changes what the gap means. Because the most dangerous thing a broken system can do is convince you that its output is the truth about you. It isn't. And the moment you stop letting the number define the narrative, everything changes.